The Fed15 podcast is presented by Serving Those Who Serve, a financial planning practice serving federal government employees and retirees all over the country. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be taken as financial advice. All listeners should consult their personal advisors before taking any action. The opinions expressed by our hosts are their own and do not reflect the views, policies, or position of either Raymond James or Serving Those Who Serve. Securities are offered through Raymond James Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services are offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors, Inc. Serving Those Who Serve is not a registered broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services, Inc. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Fed15 podcast presented by Serving Those Who Serve. Each week, we'll discuss the latest news and info that feds need to know in 15 minutes or less. So whether you're a seasoned federal employee or whether you're just starting out in your career and have some things to learn, Fed15 has got you covered. Grab your coffee, kick back, and we'll tell you what you need to know but might have missed during the week. We're your hosts. I'm Katelyn Murray, and I am joined by Mr. Dan Sipe himself, folks.
How you doing, Katelyn?
I'm doing good. You know, I can't believe that we're already so far into the summer, but you know, it'll be fall before you know it.
Yes,
crazy.
my favorite sporting event is going on right now, the Tour de France.
Very cool.
And yeah, although Tade just really crushed the time trial the day before yesterday, so they were saying it could be over. That'd be early, but we'll have to see. It's very exciting to watch.
Very cool. Very cool.
That's sort of one of my bucket listy things.
Yeah, to go.
To get to see just one leg of it.
Yeah. Any plans to go? You got to get that on the calendar, man.
Well, there's a lot to do here, Katelyn. There's a lot to do for our feds. Me gallivanting off to watch the European version of NASCAR. I think about it. Brightly colored stuff. Okay. Sponsors on everything. Going by fast. So, and actually, I would not even need to see the men's tour. I would happily watch the women's. Because I think just seeing the French countryside with the peloton whizzing by would be pretty cool. So that's definitely something I've got on that working list.
Cool. Very fun. Awesome.
So,
well,
how's your summer going?
It's going well. It's been a rainy summer for us because there's been a lot of, storms and stuff that we're catching, just on the outskirts of. Thoughts and prayers go out to all the folks that are a little bit closer towards the middle of the country that are catching the brunt of it. But it's been a little rainy, but that helps to keep some of the heat in check. So that's nice. It's the time of year where I have to wake up super early in the morning in order to get my walk in before it's just way too roasty toasty outside. Got to beat the sun.
Yeah, last week was definitely an anxiety week for OG because I had my bio kids and my work kids that were facing weather issues. So thankfully everybody came through that okay, and I agree with you. Thoughts and prayers to our folks in Texas, our folks in the Carolinas, and up through there. So what do we have up for today?
So today we are talking two pretty important topics. We're going to touch on long-term care. Long-term care and long-term care insurance are kind of big topics for feds. As we know, the federal long-term care program has been frozen for a while. So we're going to talk federal long-term care insurance. We're going to talk what your options are for getting those costs covered and planning around that. And then a little bit later on, Dan is going to talk a bit about federal retirement for vets. So we've got a pretty large number of folks who start out in the military, have a whole military career, retire from the military, or transition from the military into civilian federal service. And so we're going to talk about how some of those benefits kind of combine, how those benefits interface, and how you can get the most out of your benefits if that is you, if you are a service man or woman who has now transitioned into civilian service. So touching on the long-term care piece first up. Now, long-term care impacts everyone, right? It's a concern in planning, making sure that you've got assets set aside for potential long-term care needs that could come up. We've talked about it on the podcast before. Long-term care is kind of an umbrella term that encompasses things like assisted living. in-home support, and really just those health-related care costs that aren't typically covered by Medicare or FEHB. Now, without coverage, long-term care expenses can become one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive, parts of retirement. So, to kind of address long-term care costs, the federal government launched its federal long-term care insurance program, which offered group rate long-term care insurance to federal employees, retirees, and eligible family members. This was to cover services like in-home care, adult daycare, assisted living, nursing home care. Now, the program, as you may or may not know, listener, I know you know, Dan, is administered by John Hancock, and it is sponsored by OPM. Now, it has been open to federal and USPS employees and annuitants, both active and retired members of the uniformed services. Qualified family members as well are included. However, on December 19th, 2022, the program was frozen, and it will remain closed at least through 2026. We do not have a defined date as to when that program will be reopened. I believe initially when it was frozen, we were expecting it to reopen December of last year, and that has now been extended kind of through at least the end of this year. So obviously, that's a concern for feds. It's a benefit that you used to be able to have, that you could pick up long-term care insurance and you would have some measure of protection against those extremely expensive long-term care costs. Here's the issue with long-term care. When a lot of these insurance calculations were created, folks were living maybe into their 70s. Now we're routinely living into our 90s. And it's really not as crazy as it used to be to run a financial plan out into 100, because folks are, if you're living into your early 90s, you want to make sure you're good if you live a little longer than that. So the concern really is rising premiums. With folks living longer and having more long-term care needs, I say this all the time in client meetings, we're getting really good at outliving the stuff that kills us quickly. The heart attacks, the strokes, and the reward for that, other than being around to enjoy your family and, this beautiful planet longer. The reward for that is that we get to experience the stuff that doesn't take us out of the game so quickly. And a lot of that stuff can create care needs. Thinking Alzheimer's, we're thinking dementia, we're thinking diabetes, those sorts of things. And so with more folks using their long-term care, because population-wise we're living longer due to increases in advances in medicine, we're seeing rising premiums in long-term care plans. We're also seeing insurance companies getting out of the long-term care game entirely. And so that is definitely presenting challenges both in the federal long-term care plan and outside of it. So this is a long-term care insurance industry problem, not just a federal plan problem. Now,
absolutely.
Couple pros of the federal plan, just so you know, group rates and simplified underwriting are involved in the federal plan compared to private long-term care options. If you've ever applied for long-term care insurance in the past through a private company like Genworth, somebody like that, there's pretty intense medical screening that comes along with that. You have to answer a lot of questions, and they really look into your medical history. With the federal long-term care insurance plan, it's like group health insurance, right? They're not looking, or group life insurance is a better one-to-one comparison. They're not digging into your personal details of your history. It's a group plan, so you're getting a group rate. If you're really unhealthy, that means you could get a better rate, right? If you're really healthy, that means you're probably paying a little bit more for all the unhealthy people that are averaging together to get that group rate. So you do have comprehensive coverage across various care settings, and the benefit, obviously, with the federal plan, in addition to private plans, is it's going to give you a little bit more financial security, especially for my folks who don't have those family caregivers. So think single folks who don't have kids, right? But really, even folks who do have kids, a lot of times don't want to burden their kids with needing to be a caretaker kind of in the middle of their life where they're super busy and have all sorts of, they're raising their own kids. So cons of the federal plan, we already talked about how your premium could end up being higher. There's also limited customization compared to private or hybrid policies. And there's an unstable history. We've seen premium hikes in 2010, 2016, 2024. And then probably the biggest con, Dan, is the current enrollment freeze. So even if you wanted federal long-term care insurance right now, you can't quite get it.
And to be fair on the premium increases, if you look at private sector policies over that same period, you had increases of over 1,000%. So yes, it's gone up, but realistically, I think they've done a pretty good job of holding the line there. But now they've got to find out what their claim experience is going to look like, because as you correctly identify, Katelyn, it was based on my parents' data. And yes, if they went into custodial care situation, a man was gone in 2 years, a woman was gone in 3.
Right.
Well, now the boomers bought it, and my group will do anything and everything to stay out of the home. So we want in-home care, and we're living longer, so they've got to get their hands around that.
For sure. So when it comes down to long-term care, really, I mean, I think the question here is less about federal plan, which is frozen, and private long-term care plan. I think the question comes down to self-insuring versus having a long-term care insurance plan. And, it's a complicated topic. We can't get into all of the nuts and bolts of it, but you should know that self-insuring is an option for long-term care. You can build a financial plan really around those long-term care costs and kind of factoring those in. You want to make sure that you're including some sort of inflation factor there, because unfortunately, the cost of care rises faster than the cost of bread, milk, or eggs. But, it is possible to self-insure if you plan ahead and if you kind of allocate the resources towards that. Alternatively, you could look at a private long-term care insurance plan. Most folks will say early 50s is when you need to take a look at that, although I have seen recent data suggesting that maybe your late 40s is a good time to start looking into it, given the changing landscape around long-term care insurance. So definitely hit our blog for more information on long-term care. We've got a bunch of great articles, not just the one we're featuring this week, on that topic and how to kind of work that into your planning. It is something that I think a lot of folks forget about. It is one of those unpleasant topics like estate planning that we don't like to think about. But the reality is, if you think about it now, if you plan around it now, your care in retirement is going to look so much better. Dan, you mentioned the boomer generation and how important it is to stay home. That's something that could be a reality if you plan far enough in advance. So you don't want to get stuck without a plan, particularly around that long-term care stuff. All right. Well, Dan, you've got some words of wisdom for vets that are looking at a second career in federal civilian service. So tell us what we should know about that.
Well, not just for the vets who could be considering it, the ones who already have. Because, Katelyn, you know this, we run into it, and it hurts my heart that when we meet somebody who is 20 years into their civilian federal career and they had 8 years of military service and they did not make their deposit yet. Now, it still makes sense, even 20 years later, to do that, but you pay interest. And if you had done that in the first 3 years, you wouldn't have. So, folks, if you're watching this, if you served our country in uniform and you have not made your deposit, do it today, and look to your left, look to your right. And if there's somebody who recently joined you that served, remind them to do that, because that is just a huge point. Now, in some instances, they are limited. We can help you determine if you are retired. So you're collecting a military pension. In some instances, it can be advantageous to waive that military retirement and fold in to the FERS system. It is limited. You have to look for specific things. We know what to do. Generally, what you find is that is a situation where somebody, as they've progressed in their career and their life, perhaps were in an enlisted status while they were in uniform, and now they're a senior person in government. There can be a really interesting trade-off there. It's at least worth the conversation. Okay. So that's an important thing to know. If you're coming in and you have a military TSP and now you're going to have a civilian TSP, there might be a conventional thought floating that says, oh, let's put them together. That'll be simpler. Hold on. Time out. Did you serve in combat? Because if you did, that military TSP has been keeping track of the fact that you're tax-free during that period.
Mm-hmm.
And when you roll it into the civilian, it's not going to remember that anymore. So before you even think about doing that, if you are unclear, hit us up. We'll help you. We'll help you figure that out. Okay. But moving into civilian service, yes, you're going to have the TSP again. Now, another thing that'll be really interesting for you coming in, or if you're here now, and this is top conversation that we have a ton of these with people, is you may be eligible for Tricare because of your uniform service, and now you're in FEHB, and you may be eligible for both going into retirement. There are strategies that you can deploy for getting the most for yourself out of that. So you may want to be Tricare for life with Social Security, and you might want to suspend, not drop, never drop.
Not drop.
Ed Zerdorfer's 11th commandment, thou shalt not drop. FEHB in retirement. Suspend and try that out and see how that works for you. Again, we are able to help you with that, with those conversations. Another thing to think about, you could be covered under a Federal Employee Group Life Insurance Program in civilian service, and you have VGLI and SGLI coming from your uniform side. VGLI does carry a cost. So again, you want to do a comparison on that. It's fairly easy to do, but you want to make note of that. Relative to what Katelyn touched on earlier, long-term care, veterans can have situations, especially if they're retired, they may have some housebound allowances for disabilities through the VA. So keep that in mind. That's something that could be out there for you, and it's worth running to ground. So veteran feds have some unique opportunities to optimize retirement, healthcare, life insurance that most people would not be able to consider. And, when in doubt, work with a CFP experienced in both veteran and federal benefits. I never gild the lily. We are infinitely stronger on the civilian side, but we do speak uniform. Okay. We're not as fluent with it, but we have served so many people through the years that are in federal service that have the uniform service background that we can generally guide you through that. And don't be a stranger to our website, because we pump a lot of free resources up there. But as you know, I always begin the FedLife podcast and the webinars that I host with thank you for your service. So if you're a vet with us, double thank you for your service, and we want you to get the most out of it.
Absolutely.
So, yep.
Yeah. And I think too, as in my experience working with vets, I think a great area for improvement, I think for us as a nation, is more benefits education for vets. So I think getting a trusted partner that you can dig into all that with, there's probably a lot that you don't know because you just weren't told. And the sooner, just like with the deposits and buybacks, right? The sooner you know about it, it literally can sometimes translate into saving you money. And it definitely can translate into saving you headaches. So just to chime in on that.
Absolutely. And to paraphrase President Lincoln, to care for he or she who has borne the battle.
Mm-hmm.
It's important. We want to help you with that if we can. And Katelyn, I think that's all we have for today.
That's it.
But folks, don't worry. You can't get rid of us. We'll be back next week with the latest updates you need to make informed decisions about your career and financial well-being as a Fed.
Absolutely. And our analytics does show us that about 3/4 of the people who are watching our videos are not yet subscribed to us on YouTube. So please be sure to subscribe on our YouTube channel so that you never miss an episode. Subscribe on Spotify if you're listening there. And please, please, please remember to share this podcast with your friends and colleagues. It is a great free way to learn about your benefits every single week.
Absolutely. And for more information about the topics we covered today and more, sign up for the blog at blog.stwserve.com and subscribe to our newsletter, The Weekly Serving. We'll ship our best stuff to you every single week. It'll pop up in your inbox. You don't have to go looking for it. It's right there.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It's 3 articles. It's totally manageable. Trust me, invest this time to learn about your benefits. It will pay dividends in the future. And for those who want to dive even deeper into learning about benefits and financial planning for feds, we always encourage you to join us for one of our complimentary webinars. We've got some really good ones coming up. A great one to get started with if you've never done a webinar with us is the Financial Planning for Feds webinar. That's coming up end of this month, July 29th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. I believe that one will be with Dan. And then we've got an FEHB webinar coming up on June 30th. We won't be covering long-term care specifically in the context of that webinar. We will kind of touch on it very briefly, but we'll talk about FEHB. We'll talk about Medicare. In the context of talking about Medicare, we talk about all the stuff that's not covered. So that could be very helpful for my folks who were interested in that long-term care portion. Again, that's July 30th. From 10:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. And Dan is hosting that one as well, folks. So late July.
You're stuck with me. You're stuck with me.
Yeah, you're spending late July with Jan. So
all OG all the time.
Excellent. Now, if you prefer a one-on-one approach, we totally get that you might not have the time and energy to invest in those lengthy webinars. Feel free to reach out to our team directly for a financial planning consultation at meetings@stwserve.com to learn how you could work directly with Serving Those Who Serve to, plan for your financial future.
Absolutely. So, folks, thanks for listening to Fed15. I'm Dan Sipe.
And I'm Katelyn Murray.
And we will see you next week.
Take care, everyone.